Hello, Jason. Welcome to Automate All the Things. We're so excited to have you.
Hello. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know, we've got Jason here. He's one of a dying breed of accountants. Clearly going to go extinct. So he wanted before the profession dies, he thought he'd come on Automate All the Things and give it a last go to convince people that that's not the case. But with that joke aside, that's the joke I've been planning for the whole week. Jason, for folks who don't know who you are, give us a 30 seconds into you and what you do.
Sure. So I run an accounting practice. Super interesting. My favorite part of that accounting practice is we manage just a lot of back office stuff for
Mhm.
small businesses, and everybody has their own different problems. And it's just a blast to use no code to solve a bunch of people's problems.
So I think when people kind of imagine an accountant, you know, no code is not necessarily the first thing that people think about, but clearly it's something that you think about, that you've implemented throughout your accountancy. Is accountancy the right word? Accounting firm? Are you
In the
like
US, they say accounting firm, but internationally, they do use accountancy more. So
okay,
either one's fine, I think.
okay? Just want to make sure I'm saying the right
Yeah.
things. I don't want to be audited or anything. Um, so and you've kind of implemented no code. So I don't think that's the case. So kind of maybe talk a little bit about how you got to where you are in terms of what were the frustrations and what are kind of things that you're solving with no code, or just software in general. Because I don't think that's something that accountants necessarily use. I don't know. My account is mainly email, 95%,
Yeah.
and it's quite frustrating. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, the accounting profession has been ending for decades. It was it was the personal computer first, and there were tons of accountants who said, "I will never use a personal computer." But it's just like anything else. Most of what we do, actually, why I went into accounting is most of what we do is like data and workflow problems. And so the more forward-looking accountants were very early on cloud and cloud integrations and making sure your apps could talk to each other.
Mm,
And so for those of us that were really nerdy on that early days, leaning into native integrations, I think the logical next step for most people is, this native integration doesn't quite do what I want it to do. How can I build something that will take it the last mile or kind of fill in this gap to help me out? And that's why I think there's a pretty cool like growing community of accountants that are becoming no code enthusiasts.
So I think when you say native integration or integration, I think that might mean something different to folks who are no code users, right? So when you say integration, like what does that mean? And I guess, do you have some examples of the types of workflows that you're like, oh, I didn't get the flexibility that I needed. I'm gonna like build it myself with some no code. So kind of give some of that context.
Yeah, so accounting software is a great example of something that has a pretty big ecosystem of native
Hmm.
integrations. We've all seen app A integrates with app B, but we know that not all integrations are made the same.
Right.
Usually it means some aspects of those programs will talk to each other, but others won't. So, yeah, I mean, almost every day we're running into scenarios where it's like, it'll pull these fields in, but not these other fields,
Right.
or it'll trigger off these things, but not these other things that we need. And so you start kind of building out your own kind of tool belt of, okay, how do you fill in these gaps when you come across them?
Right. And so with that, you then just are like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to build the whole thing. I'm just going to build my own. I'm going to go first principles, Zapier, Airtable automations, Integromat, whatever. Like I don't need to have, or not, I don't guess I can rely on that software, but I want to get full flexibility. And that's where you are today.
Yeah, and accountants are in a great spot for that because we get paid to do a job, and your client usually doesn't care how the job gets done. So
Mm,
like the incentive of automating all that stuff, like it's ours for the taking.
right.
We're coming into where maybe there was a human doing a manual process and we're replacing that function. And the assumption is we're just going to plug another human into that. When most of the time we're automating that work away. So there's loads of upside in it for us.
Mm. Right. And I think that's actually quite different from a lot of like hourly type work. So you're saying like, hey, if I'm automating for you, you just care about the value at the end of the day. So before we jump into Airtable and like give one example, right? We've been very theoretically speaking about workflows. So before we jump in here, Jason, like what are some of the workflows that accountancy or accounting firm does and that you think are like prime spots where building out your own software with no code makes sense?
Yeah. Uh, One we've done a lot of is around reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So, a client may need, a client has kind of their monthly goals, and we'll like review those with them every month. But the reality is, there's usually a lot of things that funnel into what make up those monthly goals throughout the month.
Mm-hmm.
So we've used like automated reporting for, reporting on the inputs leading up to that goal on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. So we've used Banner Bear quite a bit for image generation, where you pull certain bits of data and then kind of issue this scorecard on an automated basis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Stuff like that to kind of reduce the feedback loop. Um, but yeah, there's so many examples. Approvals is a really big one that we're going to talk about today. But basically, just getting data from A to B.
Right. Yeah. And so approvals, what we'll jump into is like, you run my payroll. Is the example. And then I have an employee who needs time off, and you need to like approve that time off and then trigger a workflow where that vacation is accounted for in payroll. There's gonna be like some really bad jokes. I don't know. I'm not an account. Like this is the best I can do with the material that I
That's all
have.
right. It's all right. I've heard them all. It's a
Yeah,
safe
right,
place.
right. And so you approve it, and then that kind of triggers a workflow to change the payroll to account for that vacation. Is that kind of broadly what you're thinking about in this approval workflow?
Yeah, so payroll is a great example of where there are fantastic apps out there to automate all aspects of processing payroll and submitting payroll tax returns and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there are always things that fall outside of that, where you've got to get certain data, bits of data or information into that system in order to do that. So it's kind of like the last mile. Like, how do you round up the info you need? Time off requests are a great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know if a person is out on paid vacation, then I'm not going to pay them right.
Right.
So some of these recurring pain points we have when you do payroll for 100 different people, at a certain point, it makes sense to build your own solution to fill in that gap and get you the data you want in a format that's easy for you to work with.
Totally. Okay, so before we jump in, we're going to build that piece of software. Do you want to kind of say hi to a few folks in the chat? We got Michael, Penny, as usual, Reina, who's a big follower of you on Twitter as well. And I say this as a fanboy of Jason, huge fan. Peter, welcome. Got Daniel, classic. So yeah, if you're new here, we're going to spend the next 45 minutes building out, an approval workflow in Airtable. We do this every week. So welcome. Make sure to say hi in the chat. I'd love to know whether people are like more on the accounting side or on the no code side in the chat. Just curious, whether I need to like translate or whether Jason needs to translate. So let us know in the chat if you're on the accounting or on the no code side. And with that, let's kind of jump in here. All right. So I'm here in Airtable, Jason, and I'm gonna let you lead this. You're gonna be the one helping me build this. So tell me a little bit about the workflow side of it, and what data do you need, and how do I structure my database here? So we got Peter, Michael, who are on the accounting side, Chris on the no code. So I'm gonna say 50-50 here, 50-50. So I'll translate,
Okay.
and then you'll translate as well.
Yeah, I'm just impressed everybody didn't leave when we said accounting. So we're off to a good start, I think. So an approval, yeah. So through the lens of like time off requests, starting out really basic, what are the details that you need to have to be able to manage kind of the life cycle of a request? Probably a start date and end date.
Okay. And so before we jump in, like what tables, like I guess is each time off like one separate request, right? And so we're gonna have like a request table of like this is the request that we need to approve or disapprove.
I think so. And then when you get into people and stuff like that, you're going to be referencing out to other bases.
We have
But yeah,
we have the two killer convincing people to stay. We're talking about accounting and relational databases. So that's, if you're still here, you're my people, right? You know that you care about the same things we do. So requests are going to be like time off. So a start date, a due date, and then we'll relate those two people. Let me zoom in here a little bit. So you're saying I need a start date, right? Let's do that. American format. Now that I'm American, now I live here, I can do American format. End date. There we go. All right. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna take Friday, so that whole week, right? So what else? What else do you kind of need to know to say approve or disapprove?
You got to know who's requesting it.
Okay, and let's do a single line text for now, right?
This is how I build these things. Is I think of what are all the individual things I need, and then I think, is this better to be a separate table or not? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. What else do you need?
I need to know who the approver ought to be. So who to notify for approval.
Okay. Awesome.
Probably some sort of status. Has it been approved or not?
Got to have a status. So we're saying approved, pending, rejected. How's that? Anything else you're seeing there?
Yeah. That's probably it.
Pro tip, you can order these, right? Actually, a rejected feels, Okay, boom, boom, boom. So far, so good.
And then maybe just like a notes field. So they could drop a note in there about why they're requesting the time off, or
let's give it a little rich text field. Another pro tip, if you search for long text, it'll disable rich formatting. And if you search for rich text field, it'll enable it. Small things. It's the small little things that make a big difference. Okay, cool. So I'm going to say I'm the requester. And the approver is going to be Jason. No, because the approver is at my company, or is that at your company, right?
My accounting firm doesn't approve it. Yeah, it would be the manager of the requester.
Aron manager. Status, it's pending. And, Raina from the chat mentions email address for automation probably when a request has been updated. Now, this is interesting. Yep. Let's get into this. So let's do one more. And we'll talk about, so let's get one more request. Okay, and this is Jason requesting from Jason manager. We're going to put it pending as well and nothing to add. Folks want attachments. How many things do you submit for vacation? Me, it's like a Slack message. I'm like, hi, I am out. Bye. Please don't DM me for 3 weeks. Do I need to have receipts of where I'm going or what I'm doing? Okay, we can give it a
flight confirmations.
Yeah,
I don't usually for time off requests, but part of the beauty of this is I think you can repurpose it to be a bunch of different things.
You're
where
right.
You absolutely would want an attachment.
Yeah, like expenses. So I think this is a good example. So if you're thinking of maybe you have expensing software, but maybe you're a small company and you want to kind of have this very simple, right? You could upload the receipt, right? So I know that that's a possibility. I know there's actual expensing software, and that's not necessarily something you want to build in no code, but so Raina mentions a Slack channel where an update can be posted. Again, definitely a really good idea, but then Raina, is that at the record level, right? So I don't think you want the inputter or the approver to be saying oh, send it to this Slack channel. That's actually something that's probably hard coded, right, in the automation itself. And so it doesn't have to be at the data level. But those are kind of really good examples of things you might add as a field and then be like, oh, actually, I don't need it. So I always encourage people, and I think you're saying the same thing, of add as many fields as you think is necessary and then kind of figure it out as you go along. Let us know in the chat if there are any kind of other ideas of fields of folks adding, but this for me, Jason, feels about right. So
yep.
Okay, so the first thing I want to kind of, how do we get the email, right? So, Raina's right. Aron I might misspell my name. I want to know how many dates someone has taken off, right? To be able to approve or reject. So how do we add information about requesters?
I think you pull requesters out onto a separate table, right?
I'm not trying to trap you. I know I know you know these things. So we're gonna go ahead and customize this field type and turn a single line text into a linked record. Right? Exactly. So we're doing a linked table, and we're gonna create a new table calling people table, and we are not gonna allow multiple records. Go. Exactly. So now I have a people table. It was bothering me too, Mark. I'm sure, Mark, like knowing you, this unnamed record is also bothering you. We'll get that fixed as well. I promise. Um, so I guess, Jason, like, what is the value of creating this new table and now having a relationship instead of a single line text for each requester?
Um, the people themselves have properties. So, email address was an example we brought up. Depending on the interface you choose to use for how to manage this, there's certain things you're going to want to associate with people,
Hmm.
like email address, or maybe even like a DM channel ID for Slack,
Right.
or who their manager is. So, like if
Right.
it's Aaron that requests it, who do we need to send the approval to?
Okay, so for folks who are kind of like, okay, that let's get into it. Let's actually add those as fields. Everything you mentioned, right? So one was email, right? So I'm adding an
Mm,
email field, and let's say, I'm just gonna put my own email here, and you are Jason at amazing.com. Go, and then the second one you mentioned was manager.
manager, yeah.
So how would you envision saying Jason manages Aaron, or let me add a Aaron manager doesn't have a request time off is Aaron manager at gmail.com. How would you say Aaron manager manages Aaron? It was a little weird to say.
You'd have a field that basically just points to another record in the same table, right?
Right. And so we're going to call this manager field, and it's going to be a link to another record. Now, pro tip, you can link within the same table, right? So I can say Aaron's manager is Aaron manager, and Jason is CEO. Jason has no managers. He just does whatever he wants. He does TikToks all day.
Yep.
And then we could have what do they do? And then I have me, I do work. And then Jason does TikToks. There you go. It's very simple. Now, Raina, if you're impressed, wait till we get into an org chart. We can build an org chart later of our whole company. Now, a few things here. I know people watching back are like, okay, but my data for people lives elsewhere, right? So you could actually sync from other places, right? So you can sync from Google Outlook, another Airtable based, Jira, Salesforce if you're on the enterprise side. So if your org chart lives in Salesforce, but you still want to be able to do that link, you can sync information from third parties. So just pro tip there. Cool. Okay. Is there any other information we want to add about the person who is either the requester or the approver?
I think eventually, once I built this out, I realized we probably want to manage the life cycle of the people themselves too. So if
Mm,
somebody comes or goes, so the people themselves need a status, kind of like the requests.
yeah. Okay, cool. So kind of like employed, like FTE. Like, what do you call someone who's been no like just forget about them? Like, how do you
I would probably just say active, inactive,
active and inactive?
because it could be for a bunch of different reasons.
I can see, you're a serious person. Okay, we're active. We're active. I'm like giving you, jokes, and you're like, no, we're gonna be very serious here. Status, yeah, awesome. Department team names, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's totally right. You can have a department. So, okay, let's actually add an inactive here. So I do have something up my sleeve. I want to make sure people leave some here with some learnings. Cool. And what this person does is shorts, YouTube shorts, and no one watches YouTube shorts, so got fired. Okay, so now, okay, so I've got my kind of one request per record. Now, one thing that is frustrating is this unnamed record, right? So how should we kind of name our records such that they make sense?
What did I do? I think what I did was I used a formula field to name it something helpful. Um, because I think at one point I created a calendar view, and so I
Right.
wanted the name of the calendar event to be something constructive.
Okay. So
Um,
tell me what would be like a constructive thing you would like to see in that calendar, and we'll build a primary field from that.
Definitely the person's name.
Okay. So the requester name, right? Requester. There we go.
Requester name, right? Um, maybe a shorthand version of the date range.
Okay. You're making me work here. Making me work.
Yeah, not just the date, but a shorthand version.
Okay. Yeah. We want, let's say, the start date. And then this is why I don't bring Airtable folks on the stream, because I'm always worried that they trap me into like doing things live. So I think I can do it. Let's do day, month, year. I think that's good. Let's close that out. And then we got Mark in the chat, who's also like an Airtable expert, so I feel doubly pressured to get this right. So okay. Requester, little dash, boom, and then date time. How about that? Just the start. We can do. I just want to see if this works. Okay, cool. Okay, actually, let's. I feel confident now, right? And
I'm going for it.
until, right? Let's give another. Let's just copy paste that again, and we're gonna say date time format is the end date. And then Reina, thank you, says status. Maybe we put that in brackets at the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh man, I went from like I'm not confident to I will do anything. I have no fear. And then let's do status. We have some, I think, David, we have some Europeans, year, month, day. Okay, I think this should work. Yeah, pending, great. So pending, name, start date, and then end date. Awesome. Okay, so that, and then let's actually, I think a good example, you said, why does this matter? I think a good point is like a calendar. So requests, so time off calendar. And we can go until end date, done. And we see on a calendar, and what's informative here is that yes, we have the dates, but we also understand by reading the record where it is. And now this is new here, by the way. You can add like more labels like this. So status, things like that. You can also add a cover image. So if you want to weirdly put the image of the person who's out, for instance, you can add that. So this is new. You can customize the labels. So that makes the primary field creation a little less useful, right? So I can literally just go, who's the approver, the status, and the requester all in one.
Yeah.
And it makes you have the option. So that's totally new. But best practice, always have a unique and informative primary field. Okay. Let's keep going. We've got, okay, how do I guess put information in, or how do we think about like where did you go from, okay, I have a record for each approval that I need to approve?
Well, you could build out the form for making requests. I think that's what I did next, because that's a good way of kind of validating, do I actually have everything here that I need?
Okay. So let's create a form view. So this is time off request. Okay. Boom. This pro tip, I remove everything first, right? So requester, that feels like the first thing we should ask. Who are you? Start date, end date. Approver. Do we need approver as a Field, I don't think so. I think we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Status
Yeah.
is something we don't want to show, and then apparently, oh, they're out of order. Who are you? We should just order this properly. Boom. Okay. So now a time off request. Great. Who are you? Is a linked record, start date, end date, anything to add. And then the approver, we can actually bring it in, right? So we'll do that in a moment.
Yep.
Let's share the form. Now, I always hesitate to share forms in the chat, either because people will do it too much or people will mess with the stream. So, but I trust you folks. I trust you folks. So I'm gonna drop it into the chat. Go ahead. Go do some time off request, folks. You can only submit. I can actually add a few folks. So I can add Reina. I can add Daniel. Be nice, folks. So this, if we go here, yeah, so approver, exactly. So we can look up approver, and we'll do that in a moment, right? So the form goes, who are you, right? So we have Reina, Daniel. So this pulls from that people table. Now, one thing here is that we see inactive, which is a problem, right? You shouldn't be able to select someone who's inactive, and that's one of like the control mechanisms. So there are kind of two ways to fix that, and we'll get into that. So start date and an end date. Let's submit one. I'll just submit one for Daniel. This is me going to Cuba. Please accept. Family is waiting, and we bought tickets. Just really begging to get approved. And so if I go into the requests, okay, I got Daniel and a few folks. People, thank you for being super respectful. I appreciate that. I trust you. I will share more forms with you now. Appreciate that. Thanks, Reina. Okay. Now, how do we fix this inactive? Right. So there are two ways here. Here, if you go here, you can limit record selection to a view. So let's create an active view in our people. Filter where status is active. Actually, best practice would be is not inactive. If you ever add other like contractors maybe or things like that, you just want to filter out inactive, right? So active or maybe not inactive would be a better name, but who's got time for that? Right, so active, there we go. So what I've done there is I've said limit the selection of that linked record to active. And then if I go back to the time off request, go forward, you'll notice that inactive is no longer there. So that's just like a little pro tip. Make sure that in your business logic, you can actually bake in some of that business logic in the forms themselves. So I see you're going to your mouse. Are you like going to fix your workflow? You're like, I'm going to go fix my Airtable base.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, now I'm trying to remember if I did that. I think I did. I think I was smart enough to think ahead.
Cool. So next, Reina had a good point of like, how do we pull in the approver, right? So we have the approver right here as like a manager. Can we bring up that approver here automatically?
Yeah, so that would be what would it be, a lookup record? Is that what it's called?
Lookup field, but you know.
Lookup field? Yeah, field, right.
So we're going to change this. We're going to go to requester. We're going to go to, the requester, and we're going to look up manager. Right. So I'm the only person who has a manager. Let's make Jason manager for everyone. So you manage Aron manager, you manage Reina, Daniel, and boom. Now, naturally, like we already have that information. We know who their manager is. That's the person that should be approving. So we've got that. So now I think we have like a pretty robust way of having folks submit time off, right? So they go to this form, they submit it, and we can do the same thing with like people, adding new people, things like that. Let's make these active. Oh, okay. So where do we go from here? right? How do we keep building? Do we want to talk about in automations? Do we talk about interfaces? Do we do some business logic? Um, and Reina, yes, you can create views for each manager. You can, the world is your oyster. So, Jason, what did you do next in this kind of automating approvals?
So you've got to wait for people to submit requests. And so presumably anytime somebody submits a request, then the manager is going to get some sort of notification,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think the next step would be, how do you give the manager a way to then approve or deny?
Okay. Small thing here. Can I do one small thing before we go?
Yeah.
So, one thing is the status is not auto filled. There's two ways to fix that. You can create an automation that when a record is created, it's automatically pending, right? So that's one way. I have another, like I have a geeky way of doing it, where in the time off request, you can actually put status as an option and then limit the selection to specific fields and only have pending. Now, if you want to be, so that what this will do is that the person has to put it as pending, right? Status pending. But if you really want to be geeky, you can actually pre-fill. Do I remember how to do this? Pre-fill status equal pending. I think that should work. Mark will. There we go. Okay, yeah. So if
Wow.
you have this URL that you're sharing with folks, it'll autofill. Um, Mark, I'm both happy that Mark is here because if I mess anything up, he'll be able to help us out. There you go. Oh, you can hide now. It's true. You can do hidden pre-fills.
Yeah.
I don't. So, Steven, drop it in the chat. Drop the URL in the chat. I don't know what the hidden. Yeah, you can do the hide. Is it hide status? Oh man, when your chat's better at you at Airtable, hide status equal true. Hide underscore equal true, right? Equal status. Come on. Oh no. True. There we go. Boom. We did it. We did it. Um, Congratulations, everyone. I got sweaty there a little bit. Okay, so back to automations. Sorry, where were you? Automations. Talk to me about automations. What are we building?
So manager needs to be notified, right? That, hey, you got to go out and approve this thing now. So with what we've got now, that's probably an email going out and giving them the specifics of the request.
Okay, so what do I trigger? What is the starting point for that automation?
I think it's going to be any old new record, right?
So when a record is created, we're going to go to the request table. Now, for folks, again, like if you're like, oh, I don't know which trigger to pick, when record is created is honestly very rare, especially now that Airtable has when form is submitted. I would actually argue that when form is submitted is a better trigger, because if someone just goes willy-nilly creating time off requests in your table, you don't necessarily want it to trigger that automation. Or what you can do is like have a separate automation when the status is pending, which would kind of get both use cases. But we're getting too far. We're going too far. Requests, time off request. Let's choose a record. So this is also new. I don't know if you saw this. Use suggest a record, which kind of like the Zapier, like we'll pull one for you that makes sense. But then you can also choose a specific record. So, Reina. There we go. We're picking Reina because she's awesome. Okay, next. What do we do with this? So when a form is submitted, what is it that we want to do?
Send an email to whoever needs to approve it.
Okay, and who needs to approve it is what field. So when I go to, what field should I be kind of pulling in here?
The approve. I guess is it the name field of the approver linked record? Is that what it would be?
So right now, let's go to the linked record. Let's continue. And we only have a link. So we actually need to pull in our grid view the approver email. So that is currently in the people field. So we're going to do a lookup. Let's go into people, and then we want email, create field. And so some folks, approver email. No, that's the wrong one. I have the manager one. I want the manager one. How do I pull it in? So I have manager. Oh, I need to pull in manager email here.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. It's a two-step thing. Reina's on top of the mistakes, man. If you need someone to build this for you, Reina's got it. Reina's a pro. So I want to look up in this linked record manager. I want to pull the email, right? That way I can pull this email in requests as well, right? Because that wasn't a field here. So manager email. Go. Now Jason, everyone except Jason or inactive has an approver email. That's actually something to think about in terms of like error management, but let's not go there. Cool. So send an email. I'm sending it to, let's pull Reina's email again, just to get that field. And we're sending it over to approver email. Value insert. There you go. Subject. Your employee or someone wants time off. What's the tone of your emails, Jason? I imagine they're like whimsical. Or
Whimsical. Yeah, like palm tree emojis, maybe a couple cocktail emojis, that sort of thing.
yeah. I mean, that's the vibe I get from, it's like a very Gen Z, like this is what I expect.
Yeah.
Like this, and like you get the first name of the person, you're like, hey, let's go requester name. Reina wants to take time off. You should totally let them. But make sure. So now you have to go here, and let's go. This is how I write my emails, by the way.
Okay.
And approve. Jason. But actually a robot. There, how's that?
That's good.
Okay, we can add an attachment if we want. So folks, maybe use a unique. So Chad's got some advice. Chad from the podcast. Maybe use a unique element, name and date in the subject, so these get nest and lost if multiple come in. So if your whole team is like, I want to take time off, and they all go at the same time, like a protest, like a strike, right?
Sure.
But they want to go through the normal approval processes.
But they're still submitting a strike request. Yep. Sure.
I've never been part of a strike. I assume that's not how it works. Okay, instead of someone, let's go. Yeah, you're totally right. So Chad's got some. So requester. Oh, it's time off. Okay, cool. So form is submitted. We're gonna go ahead and send that email. Now another thing that's really cool, you can run, right? I'm not gonna run because it's all fake emails, or you can generate a preview. So it says, this is what folks will see. And it's sent from Airtable automations. You can also send it from Gmail, things like that. So, hey, yo, Reina wants to take time off. You can see that Reina wants time off. You can also add the dates, right? And then we have the URL here. Pro tip, you can also do, like, you can make the here clickable with a little bit of markdown. Not going to do that because stress, and we're live. Right, so the person could go here, and it opens up this kind of record. So how do you just tell people that they need to go into approved? How do you notify the person or explain to the person, like, how do you actually approve this?
So we use a whole separate approvals table with its own form that they then submit whether it's approved or not. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So you don't go into the record itself. You have in approvals table. So kind of turning this single select into a linked record almost.
Not really. There may be a way to do it that way. What we do is we have basically a hidden field ID
Mm-hmm.
uh, and associates the form submission with a request.
Mm,
Uh, and what's linked in the email
the
is the
form.
approval form.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Do you want to build that? Do we want to show people how to do that? Is that interesting to people? I'm gonna assume
The
so.
upshot is you don't have to be like authenticated into Airtable. You don't have to be an
Mm,
Airtable user. Then like anybody can do it.
okay. Yeah, let's do it quickly. Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, so let's do an approvals table. Can you create link buttons within the email to automate or decline requests? The answer is yes. It would actually kind of require a webhook, I would say, but you would need like a separate webhook hosting service. Let's do that for a future stream. I feel that idea of a button in the email that auto accepts or rejects would be a good future stream. So essentially, here you're saying, I want a linked record to requests, right?
Yep.
And then, so go to requests or no, right? And so every time so that person just needs to go and then I guess they just submit the fact that this request has been approved. Right? So you don't actually need other fields.
So the way I have it is it links to a record and then you have a field to approve or reject.
Oh, okay. So so approve or reject. So single line. Approve, reject. Man, if someone rejected a time, I would be so angry.
So you also need a reason field. Like if they do say, no, Aaron, everyone else is going to be on strike that same week. You can't strike that week also.
okay, so why did you reject? Yeah, there you go. Hey Christian, welcome. Excited to have you here. So we're doing some geeky stuff here. Okay, so you're saying essentially instead of sending the record, what we can is send a pre-filled form of this, and like I guess the name, you just do the record ID. Is that it?
I think I just did an auto ID.
Okay.
Uh,
So let's do auto number here. Record ID will work fine. Record ID will work. That actually might make things easier. Cool. Okay, so you're saying if I want to accept Daniel's vacation here, I'm going to go to the approvals table, which I'll just call approve. And I'll create a record that says, okay, go to Daniel, like this one, approve. And I did not reject. So that one is approved. And then instead of having a status here, hide this field for now. We're just going to have like approved. And then we're going to use a lookup, right? We're going to look up from the approvals table, approve or reject, right? So the only one who's been approved is Daniel, right? Does that make sense? So now checkboxes would work as well. What I don't like about checkboxes, Reina, is that their rejection is also the null. So if someone rejects, is it because they haven't seen it that it's empty, or because they've rejected it? So I like the explicitness of approve or reject, right? So coming back to our automation, take it a step back. This is the international sign for backing up. Like instead of sending the record, what do we send instead? Send a form?
Yep.
Okay. The form. So we're saying, okay, this is the approvals form.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you have the request, you have the approve or reject, and I have a pro tip for why did you reject, but we'll get that later. Okay, so let's open this form. Right, so this has all the requests. Now note that this has all, whether they're pending or approved, right? So we need to fix that a little later. But let's say Jason, I've approved and I did not reject. I can submit. go here, and then I have approve, right? This one right here. So what I need, if I'm understanding what you do correctly, you send this form instead.
Yeah, in the email itself.
Okay. Let's go here and let's change this. Okay. Boom. Now, Reina. Okay, let's see what this looks like, right? Before we go crazy, generate a preview. Okay, and then so I go here, right? Then we hit an issue here where Reina. I need to like remember that it's Reina, and then accept. So how do I think Reina is like? How can we pre-fill that form so when the person clicks on it, it's like, oh, it's instantly pre-filled? Jason.
Yeah. So you add the pre-fill, I guess it would be the record ID then, right? To the URL of the form.
Okay, let's try this. This is actually very, so we want to go question mark pre-fill equal, right? And I want requests. No, it's underscore requests equal. And here I need the record ID of what I want to pre-fill. So let's imagine I want to pre-fill Jason Staats. But this one right here, I can pre-fill with this record ID right here. Let me actually go into that one. Record ID in the URL. This is going to get complicated. I think. So let's see if I can pre-fill this. Okay, so that pre-fills correctly, right? So look at this URL structure. Where does this come from? This comes from the request table. So this record ID is actually in the request table. So if I wanted to pre-fill Reina's, I have to go open, I have to go to the URL, I have to do this. That's going to pre-fill Reina's. So I actually need to pull the record ID into the approvals table and then generate that URL for every single approval so I can put it into the email. Does that make sense, Jason, Reina?
In order to pre-fill the approval form?
That is correct.
Don't you just add the record ID of the request to the end of the URL in the email?
That is correct. Oh, you're saying let's dynamically create it in the automation.
I guess, yeah, I'm saying in that email automation,
Right here.
add the record ID to the end of the URL. Yeah, like you just did in the URL.
That is very smart. That is not how that is very smart. Okay, so you're saying, can we generate this right here, this part, right? So this part is static, right? We're always going to pre-fill like that. And you're saying we know this from the automation that is triggering, you know, this workflow.
Yep.
Okay, so we're saying go to step 1 and we're going insert record ID. Okay. Very impressive. You're actually like I'm not making like I'm not acting here. You are saving like 3 fields, which is quite impressive.
And then you can hide it now too, which is the best part, right? So they can't fiddle with it.
That's a good point. Okay, so let's do it like this first, and then okay, so let's generate a preview. Let's make sure that this works as expected. Boom. Okay, yeah, totally. So it picked the right record. That's great. And we had picked it. And so we're also saying go ampersand. So what was it? It was hide requests equal true. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but Mark had a big big part in building the hide request. So if you want to thank anyone for having those, he's not the only builder, but he definitely had a big part of it. So shout out to Mark for building this hide stuff on the form. So make sure to give him a shout out in the chat. So yeah, so actually Mark, being, you can technically unhide by changing the URL, but I think it's important. We're talking to accountants who I don't believe, in the most part, except if you're Chad or Jason or Reina, clearly, you have the
Easy now.
capable.
Easy now, Aaron.
But if they're watching this stream, they could know. They know. But otherwise, I think we're safe. We're safe. Let's refresh this. Hey Raymar, how are you? Good to have you. We're messing with accountants, right? But I do think one thing to note here actually is that now you don't know what you're just assuming that the automation worked, which honestly it probably did, but you don't have as much context, which I think is a little bit of a risk.
So the way I built it is I built all the information you need to decide into the email,
Right.
because when you hide that, there's nothing really that helpful in the form anymore, right?
That makes sense. So you're saying you're actually putting it as line items here. So
Yeah.
start date, and then you go into the record and go start date, end date, things like that. And so one thing in the chat that someone mentioned was like, oh, could I see if anyone has overlapping requests? Right? Which I think is like a good reason to reject. One of the few reasons, unless I'm striking, and I'm just, fuck it. That's the point.
Yep.
Overlapping is the point. So you can actually add a calendar view. So, so you have the request table. We had the calendar. You can share this one. And I know people are like sometimes sensitive about licenses because it's a public view. Anyone could access this, right? So see other pending requests. And then folks could know whether they should be like worried about multiple people or if a strike is incoming. Man, our email went from like totally like emojis and this is all great to like very serious and like, and like rejection, things like that. So okay. we actually like covered about 10% of what we were hoping to cover and not a lot of the same things we wanted to cover. So Jason, with the 5 minutes we have here, what other cool stuff do you think it's pertinent for someone who's like, I want to build an approvals workflow here to know about?
What are the handy things? The calendar view is super useful because you can share like a link to a calendar with the team, so everybody can see like time off requests, stuff like that. What else did I have? I think to me the thing that I love about this and what made it super useful for me is I ended up building out a gallery public view
Mm-hmm.
that had instructions for setting up your base
Right.
via like public forms. So like I had a form for adding team members,
Okay.
a form for removing team members, stuff like that. What else?
Yeah, so let me just actually, I want to build this out. I got like, so what you're saying is, okay, we have a new request. You can imagine a form that has like, add a new team member, remove a team member, make someone inactive. So what you're saying is like, now that you have all of these separate workflows that go into the base, it could be confusing for someone to just have a link. So you're saying, can I create a gallery view that has all the information someone needs to do the action? So really quickly, I'll build this out really, really quickly, right? So we just built out a new time off request. So we can have a notes field that says like, okay, to submit a time off request, fill out the form below. You will be notified once it's approved or rejected. But that happens rarely. We are a fun company, right? And here you can have a URL, and then this could be a URL field. And essentially we would link that form we just created here. But we're really fancy, so we're going to do, a button that says take this action. Oops, it's a button field, and do this. And it's going to open the URL from URL. Now if we create a gallery view, let's imagine adding a team member. So, to add a team member, fill out the form below. We're doing this real fast. Let's just do a form. Share form. Now we've got 2 URLs. I really want to show this because this was the most impressive. This was the cooler part. So this would be like the admin panel.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So now if we filter out everything that doesn't have a URL, boom, we can share this with folks. And this is like your control center. You as an accountancy is sharing this gallery view with folks. And they're like, okay, I want to do a time off request. I click here. Then I have my form. And I want to add a team member. I click here. I do that. And as you're building out different workflows, you can add them all into this gallery view to really have a command center for all of like the workflows that are not accounting, like accounting.
And it all lives at a single link. So like we just send the client a single link, and it's like a getting started of, hey, here's all the stuff you need to do from a single place.
Exactly. Okay. Well, we're an hour in. We covered about 20% of what we did. We went of what we wanted to cover. We were like interfaces, automations, but hopefully that was inspirational enough for folks to like understand where they go from here. So Jason, huge thanks for you to come. I'm sure a lot of people have now discovered you, I hope, and what you do. So where can they keep and kind of follow your journey of whether you're going to go instinct or not, or continue being an accountant?
I spend most of my time on Twitter, Staats CPA, but one of the guys in chat here, Chad, we started a little podcast about automation called Automation Town, all one word, and we geek on just this kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So could I find it? Do I have the URL? You guys are not
automationtown.fm.
automation.
And that'll get you all the links.
Amazing. So do you absolutely follow? I've been a listener. I'm a huge fan of you and Chad. It's been a lot of fun. And do you follow Jason on Twitter? Huge thanks for you to come. I'm excited. I think we have enough meat here to do a follow-up session. We'll get that scheduled. It was super fun to have you here. Thanks to Raina, Colleen, Raymar, who came back, Daniel, Mark, thanks for coming. Thanks, Christian, Peter, huge thanks for all of you for coming. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Middlelink and some Webflow content gating geekiness. But with that, Jason, huge thanks for coming, and I hope you'll be back one day.
For sure. Thank you, Aaron. This is great.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week, y'all.